I say this all the time, our co-op office is the best. But another thing that's really cool with Akron, the first year, you just dive right into tools for engineering and you just start designing stuff like prosthetic arms, cars, using motors to build DC currents. Yeah, Akron gave me the tools to do this, like I'm ready for a job. Hi, my name's Allie Stanley and I'm a double major in biomedical engineering and Spanish at the University of Akron.
Welcome to Soapbox Derby Racing. You're about to start an adventure that you're going to remember for a lifetime, building and then racing your own Soapbox Derby car. The Soapbox Derby program is a great learning experience for kids and adults, an opportunity to develop a mutual respect and trust, individual pride and sportsmanship. I'm Jared Zimmerman, this is Brittany, this is Gavin, this is my team, and we're going to show you how to build a Soapbox Derby car. We're going to take a look at the tools you need, we're going to show you each step of the process, we're also going to give you some helpful tips that will help you along the way, as well as show you places where you can get other information if you need it. Now the video is based on this, the written plans that came with your car's kit, and it's also designed to show you exactly how to build your car. Now you'll be building your car with the help from a parent, guardian, teacher, or mentor, like myself, and they're going to share the experience with you along the way. And if you have any questions about anything or need some clarification about plans, rules, or regulations, contact the Soapbox Derby team at their website. The website has links to useful, up-to-date information on rules and plans, ordering kits or parts online, and local race information. Now let's take a look at the tools you're going to need, Brittany, if you don't mind. All right, you're going to need 2 screwdrivers, standard flat blade, a little wider one, and a number 2 Phillips. There you go, Gavin, if you don't mind laying those out. All right, you're going to need an assortment of open-end box-end wrenches ranging from 11/32 to 3/8 to 7/16 and 1/2 inch. All very common tools, easy to find. You'll need a little bitty 5/64 Allen wrench, so don't lose that. All right, 2 sets of pliers. You'll need regular and wire cutters. What do we got next there? Tape measure. Make sure your tape measure can read at least 10 feet or measure 10 feet. Standard hammer or mallet. What next? Oh yeah, we need 2 2x4s cut to roughly 18 inches in length for support. We need a C-clamp, my favorite, battery-powered drill. You guys don't get to use this, it's all mine, okay? All right, next we got contact cement, and lastly some electrical tape. And I think that's everything. No, you know what? We're going to need masking tape. You guys want to round that stuff up? Yeah. All right. And for tips on finishing your shell, just check out your plans or visit the website. Oh, just wait, one more thing. You might want to consider putting some tung oil treatment on your floorboard. It's going to take a couple days to dry, but it's worth it. Keeps your car looking nice, right? Yeah. All right. Next, you're going to want to poke the holes in the floorboard so you can see where they're at, and then you'll flip the board over and clean the holes up. Well, like my assistants are doing here. Nice job. Now let's take a quick tour of the floorboard and some of the steps you'll be taking during this part of the building process. Starting from the front, you will find shell hole A. Step 1 is the steering stop. Step 2 is the foot brace. Step 3 is the Kingpin installation. Step 4 is the steering hardware. Step 5 is steering cable installation. Step 6 is the stabilizer installation. Step 7 is brake pad installation. Step 8 is the brake installation. Step 9 is the weight bolt installation. Step 10 is the airfoil installation. Step 11 is axle alignment and triangulation. Step 12 is shell installation. Step 13 is signage, lettering, and decoration. Step 14 is wheel kit installation. Step 15 is an assembly checklist. We'll also give you tune-up hints along the way. Now you should take some time and read ahead in your plans, starting with Step 1, steering stop installation. All right, guys, the first thing we're going to do on our Soapbox Derby car is install the steering stop. You'll need the parts for the steering stop bag. The bag contains 4 elevator bolts, some 1/4 inch nuts, and 4 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch fender washers. So the steering stop goes here at the front of the floorboard, and this is how it gets installed. Insert one elevator bolt through the bottom of the floorboard, add a steering stop hole, and press it through the floorboard. All right, Brittany, ready for the washer? Then place a fender washer on the elevator bolt on top of the floorboard. After that, install a 1/4 inch nut on the fender washer and tighten until the elevator bolt is pulled flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Perfect. After you tighten the first nut, install 2 more 1/4 inch nuts for a total of 3, then repeat the steps for the other 3 elevator bolts. All right. So here's how the steering stop should look when you're all finished. Take care to line the nuts up so that the steering stops will land on the flat part of the nut rather than the point. Nice job, guys. All right, now it's time to install the foot brace. Now the foot brace and the brake pedal from step 8 can both be moved forward or backwards in this zone to fit a driver, but you're going to want to check the plans to make sure that you fit within that zone. Get to work. Open up your foot brace bag and get your tools ready. For this, you'll need elevator bolts, fender washers, and 1/4 inch nuts. Start by inserting 2 elevator bolts through the bottom of the floorboard at the foot brace holes locations, and then press them through the floorboard. Now add a fender washer to each elevator bolt along with a nut and draw it flush with the floorboard. Then remove the washer and the nut. Place the foot brace on the elevator bolt. Add your fender washers on top of the foot brace and install your 1/4 inch nuts and then tighten them. And here's how your completed foot brace should look. Okay, team, now step 3 is a little more involved in the first 2 steps, but we can handle it, right? Okay, now this is the installation of the Kingpin, and it's going to take some sub-assembly in order to install the front and rear axles. So we're going to need the contents of the Kingpin bag and the front and rear axles. Brake, go get me some axles. Okay. Sure. I'm cracking the whip on you too. In the bag, you will find 1/4 inch flat washers, 1/4 inch nuts, 1/4 inch nylock nuts, also known as your Kingpin nuts, 1/4 inch by 3 1/4 inch gold colored Kingpins, 1/4 inch by 3 1/4 inch machine bolts, 1/4 inch by 2 inch flat washers, 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch fender washers, and 3/8 inch bushings. Let's get started on the bushing subassembly. First, place a 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch fender washer on a silver machine bolt. Then place the bushing with a flat end against the fender washer on the machine bolt. Now insert the assembly through the top of the floorboard with the beveled end of the bushing against the floorboard until the bolt extends through the opposite side of the Kingpin location. Next, place a fender washer on the machine bolt against the floorboard and install a 1/4 inch nut on the machine bolt. Use your wrench to tighten the machine bolt assembly until the bushing ends are flush with the floorboard. Like this. When that's done, remove the nut from the machine bolt and the fender washers and repeat all of these steps for the second Kingpin bushing location. Now be sure to save the machine bolt, the washers, and the 1/4 inch nut because you're going to be using those again in step 6, so keep an eye on it. Okay, we're ready to do the Kingpin subassembly. Start by placing a 1/4 inch by 2 inch flat washer, that's the big washer, on the gold Kingpin bolt. Then insert this assembly through the bottom of the floorboard at the front axle location and press it through the floorboard. After that, put a flat washer on the Kingpin, then put a fender washer on top of the 2 inch flat washer. Now put a 1/4 inch flat washer on top of the fender washer. Okay, now you're going to want to identify the front axle for this step. Now the front axle has 2 pre-drilled holes in either end, whereas the rear axle only has 1 pre-drilled hole in each end, making them easy to identify. Place the front axle on the 1/4 inch flat washer. Then put the 2 1/4 inch flat washers on top of the axle. Install a 1/4 inch nylock nut called the Kingpin nut and tighten the whole assembly. Install a second nylock nut on the front Kingpin assembly. All right, look at that. That's what your front Kingpin assembly should look like. Now just repeat these steps for the rear. The only difference is you're only going to use 1 nylock nut on the back. Looking good. And here's how the complete Kingpin rear assembly should look. Okay, we are moving right along and our soapbox derby car feels good, getting some accomplishment going, all right, huh? Okay, so for this next step, you're going to need to reach into your pocket or your piggy bank because you're going to need a quarter. Sounds weird, but I'm going to show you why in just a second. All right, you two cough up a quarter. I know one of you got a quarter on you. Let's do it. Okay, I got one. All right, next time don't let me down. The steering bag contains 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch elevator bolts, 1/4 inch by 2 inch elevator bolts, a 3/32 by 1 3/4 inch cotter pin, 1/4 inch lock washers, 1/4 inch nuts, 1/4 inch flat washers, cable pulleys, and 3/4 inch flat washers. All right, at this point in time, you're going to need your brake and steering mount. Also, you're going to need that quarter. You're going to drop that down in the recessed area where the steering shaft will go. Now insert a 1/4 inch by 2 inch elevator bolt through the floorboard bottom at the rear of the brake steering mount hole. Press it through the floorboard, then install a 1/4 inch flat washer and a 1/4 inch nut on the bolt and draw it flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Oh, started to hear the wood smash. I think it's time to give up. Okay, then go ahead and remove the nut and washer. Now repeat the steps for the second rear hole location. Place the brake steering mount on top of the 1/4 inch by 2 inch elevator bolt, then place the 1/4 inch flat washer, then a lock washer on that bolt on top of the brake steering mount. Then install a 1/4 inch nut on the bolt, but don't completely tighten that nut. All right, after you've done that, insert a 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch elevator bolt through the bottom of the floorboard at the front of the brake steering mount hole. Install a 1/4 inch flat washer and a 1/4 inch nut, and then draw the bolt flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Now go ahead and remove just the nut. Next, place a cable pulley on the elevator bolt on top of the brake steering mount, followed by a 1/4 inch lock washer on top of the cable pulley. And once you've done that, install a 1/4 inch nut on the elevator bolt, but don't completely tighten it. Now repeat those steps for the second front brake steering bolt cable pulley location. All right, we got our brake steering mount in place, and it is now time to tighten those nuts. But first, we want to make sure that we got clearance. So we're going to stick the brake plunger up through the floorboard and through the brake steering mount hole, just like that. That's how it's supposed to look. So I'd say we're ready to tighten those nuts. But check this out. Here's our steering wheel. Looks like a bow tie. It's ultra cool, and we can go either direction with it. Which direction do you think we should go? You're taking too long. We're just going to move forward. All right, let's tighten those nuts. First, insert the steering shaft through the round hole on the brake steering mount. Then raise the steering wheel and slide the 3/4 inch flat washer on the bottom of the steering wheel shaft. Push the steering wheel down through the brake steering mount hole until the shaft rests on top of the quarter that we installed in the first step. Now push the 3/4 inch flat washer up against the brake steering mount and insert the 3/32 by 1 3/4 inch cotter pin through the upper steering wheel shaft hole. Then bend the end of the cotter pin around the steering wheel shaft. All right, there you have it. Steering wheel installed. Now we're ready for the cables. All right, guys, now it's time to install the part designed to keep your car going down the center of your lane. That's the steering cable. There are a lot of parts in the steering cable bag, starting with the cable itself and the cable adjuster. A 1/4 by 2 1/4 elevator bolt, 3 sizes of lock washers, 2 sizes of eye bolts, a 1/4 inch cable clamp, 3 sizes of nuts, cable pulleys, and 1/4 inch by 1 1/4 inch fender washers. Okay, so the cable pulley is going to involve a little bit of sub-assembly in this area right here. Start by inserting one of the elevator bolts through the floorboard bottom, then press it through the floorboard. Then place a fender washer on the elevator bolt on top of the floorboard. Now install a 1/4 inch nut on the bolt and draw it flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Then remove the nut. On top of that goes the cable pulley, topped by a 1/4 inch lock washer and a 1/4 inch nut. Tighten the nut, then repeat those steps for the second pulley. Our next sub-assembly is going to be the axle eye bolt. Start by installing a 1024 nut on the 1024 by 2 inch eye bolt. Tighten the nut to the end of the threads on the eye bolt. Insert your eye bolt assembly through the driver's side of the front axle at the eye bolt location. Now place a number 10 lock washer on the bolt, then a 1024 nut, and tighten the whole assembly. After that, repeat those steps for the second eye bolt assembly. Okay. We're ready to assemble the cable adjusters. First, put an 832 nut on the 832 by 1 5/8 eye bolt. Then insert the eye bolt through any of the 3 holes in the inside of the cable adjuster and just push it through. There you go. Put a number 8 lock washer on the eye bolt along with an 832 nut, but don't completely tighten the assembly. You'll make some adjustments to this down the road in step 11. Now repeat these steps for the second cable adjuster assembly. Cool. All right, guys, we got this cable. It's going to be in your steering cable, but before we start the sub-assembly for the steering cable, we need to go ahead and find the center point of this right here. How do you suppose we would do that? Fold it in half. You guys are smart. All right. So we'll just take the two ends, we'll line them up with each other. Okay. Make sure that we get all the slack out of the cable. Now that's going to give us the dead center. And we'll take that pair of pliers if you want, Gavin, and just crimp it. Here we go. We'll turn it sideways. Nice. Maybe one more time at the tip. Crimp it like that. All right. Trust you not to get my fingers. Now you're going to take the two loose ends of the cable and feed it through the lower hole in the steering shaft. There you go. Pull the two loose cable ends through the hole until you form an eyelet at the center point of the steering cable. Now wrap one loose end around the shaft 180 degrees and thread it through the eyelet and pull most of the slack out. Now we're going to take the second loose end and go around the other side of the shaft 180 degrees. This time we're going to come through the bottom of the eyelet. That's just going to make it easier to wrap around the shaft when we head towards the pulleys. Then pull both cable ends to tighten the eyelet and secure the cable. And then center the steering wheel and temporarily clamp or have somebody hold it to keep it from turning. Now we're going to take this cable and go around the shaft 180 degrees and head over to the pulley that will be on the left side of the floorboard. There we go. And that leaves the other one. We'll head around the opposite direction and over to the other pulley. Okay, now that we've got our cable running across the front pulley, before we head to the back pulley, we're going to put the cable adjuster in. We're going to put the end of the cable through one of the remaining holes on the cable adjuster, then through the bolt, and lastly out of the remaining hole like that. All right, thanks, Gavin. After you've done that, thread one cable around the cable pulley located on the floorboard and slide 2 1/4-inch cable clamps on the cable end. From there, thread the cable through the front axle eye bolt assembly and insert the loose end of the cable back through both cable clamps. Pull the cables tight and use a 5/64 Allen wrench to tighten both cable clamps. You can place these clamps right next to each other or with a little space in between. And just repeat that process for the other cable, but be sure to check your plan book to make sure that your cable routing is the right way for the model car that you have. Now you can adjust the steering cables by adjusting the eye bolts in the cable adjuster assemblies. After that, secure both of your cable adjusters by tightening both of the nuts. The adjusters can be located anywhere along the cable. Now you can just remove your temporary clamp, or if you got a team like I do, you can just let go of the steering wheel. But be sure to test it, and what you want to do is while you're facing the front of the car, turn the wheel to the right. Make sure that your axle turns to the right. Just like that. That is awesome. We have moving parts now. This thing's really coming together. Excess steering cable is allowed to extend past the second cable clamp and can be removed by cutting and then taping off about 1/4 inch on either side of the spot you'll cut. And this will just help keep you from having frayed edges or any sharp edges on the end of your cable. Then we're going to show you how to make further cable adjustments in step 11. Now we are really making some progress on building our car. Now it's time to move to the stabilizers on the rear floorboard. The parts include 3/8" bushings, 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch machine bolts, round head bolts, 2-inch flat washers, 2 sizes of nuts and lock washers, 1/4 inch flat washers, and 1 1/4" fender washers, along with stock radius rods. Let's start by placing a fender washer on the 1/4 inch by 3 1/4 inch machine bolt from step 3, right here. Now place the bushing with the flat end toward the washer over the machine bolt. Then insert the machine bolt assembly through the top or the bottom of the floorboard with the beveled end of the bushing against the floorboard at the stabilizer bolt location here. And after you've done that, place a fender washer on the machine bolt against the floorboard and install a 1/4 inch nut on top of the washer. Tighten the bushing assembly until the bushing end is flush with the floorboard, then remove the nut, machine bolt, and washer. Repeat those steps for the second stabilizer bushing location. The nut, machine, and fender washer are only used for this subassembly and will not be used in a later step. And now it's time to build the stock radius rod subassembly. Start out by placing a 1/4 inch by 2 inch flat washer on the 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch machine bolt. Insert that assembly through the bottom of the floorboard here at the stabilizer bushing location. Now place a fender washer on the machine bolt, then add 2 1/4 inch flat washers on the fender washer. All right, Gavin, you kind of got a left and a right one of these. If you put it on backwards the wrong way, you'll have a little triangular area sticking out past the axle there, right? Okay. So yeah, I want to make sure that that's flush with the back of the axle. Then place the slotted end of the stock radius rod on the 1/4 inch flat washers. Place a 1/4 inch flat washer on the stock radius rod. followed by a 1/4" lock washer on the flat washer. Top that off with a nut over the lock washer, but don't tighten it completely. You might need to make further adjustments in step 11. Repeat the steps for the second stock radius rod. The next step is the stock radius rod subassembly here at the rear axle. To get that started, align the angle end of the rod on the bottom of the axle square stock over the stabilizer bolt hole like this. Then place a 1024 by 1¼ round head bolt through the stock radius rod and up through the axle. Put a 1024 lock washer on the round head bolt and install a nut on the lock washer, but don't completely tighten the nut because you'll need to make more adjustments in step 11. Repeat the process for the second stock radius rod to the axle assembly. All right, gang, we've assembled the parts that are going to help you steer down the hill and stay in your lane, right? Now it's on to the brakes, the parts that are going to help you stop. Which part's more important, do you think? Stopping or going? There are only a few parts to deal with in this first step: flat head bolts, 1/4" nuts, along with the brake pad plunger. To build the brake pad, you start by inserting a 1/4" by 3/4" flathead bolt through each hole of the brake pad. The thick black side should be facing towards the ground. Now align the bolts in the brake pad with the holes in the flat bottom of the plunger and insert the plunger. Place a 1/4" silver lock nut on the flathead bolt and tighten the assembly. We recommend that about 1/8 of an inch of the flathead bolt, or 3 threads, will be exposed. The flathead bolt will be recessed in the bottom of the brake pad, like this. Now just use those same steps for the other 3 bolts. Now installing the brakes is a multi-step process, but if you take your time and pay attention to the details, you'll do just fine. You'll need the parts in the brake bag and the brake pad plunger assembly from step 7, the brake spring and some tape. The parts in the brake bag include 2 sizes of elevator bolts, eye bolts, flathead screws, machine bolts, nuts, lock washers, cable clamps, fender washers, cable pulleys, the awning pulley, flat washers, and spacers. Okay, so the brake pedal from this step and then the foot brace from step 2 are able to be moved forward and backward in this zone to fit a driver. Now you're going to want to check your plans to make sure that you get them in the right location. But the first step for us now, moving on to the brakes, is to build the hinge assembly. Start by aligning the 4 hinge holes with the brake pedal. The top of the wood brake pedal has rounded corners and the bottom is straight. The 5th hole at the rounded corner is for the brake pedal eye bolt. Next, insert a flathead bolt through the brake pedal, then through one of the 4 hinge holes. Add a 1/4" lock washer on the flathead bolt, then a nut, but don't completely tighten it. Looking good. All right, so you're going to want to repeat that step for the next 3 bolts. You're going to want to continue to tighten the nuts till the heads of the bolts are flush with the brake pedal. Then it's onto the brake pedal eye bolt subassembly. Let's install a 1/4" nut on the eye bolt and tighten the nut to the end of the threads. That looks tight. Yeah. Then place a fender washer on the eye bolt and insert the assembly through the hole in the wood brake pedal on the opposite side of the hinge. Now place a fender washer on the brake pedal eye bolt assembly, install a lock washer on top of the fender washer, then a nut on the bolt and tighten the assembly. Okay, now we're going to work on the brake pedal hinge subassembly right here on the front of the floorboard. Start by aligning the 2 outer holes of the brake pedal hinge with the holes in the floorboard at the brake pedal location. By the way, the center hole of the hinge isn't used. Now insert a 1/4" by 2" elevator bolt through the floorboard bottom at the brake pedal hole location and press it through the floorboard and brake pedal hinge hole. Then a 1/4" lock washer, followed by a nut over the lock washer, but don't completely tighten because there's a couple adjustments yet to come. All right, so we're just going to repeat those steps for the second bolt. We're going to draw those nuts down until the bolts are flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Then it's off to the brake steering mount where we're going to assemble the subassembly for the cable pulley system. And they're off. The race is going between the 2. Who will draw the bolt up faster? I don't know. First, insert a 1/4" by 1" machine bolt through the cable pulley and place a 1/4" flat washer on the machine bolt. Now insert the machine bolt with a cable pulley and flat washer through the hole on the left side of the vertical plate of the brake steering mount and place a lock washer on the assembly. Place a nut on the lock washer, then tighten. This cable pulley should spin freely. Then we'll move right on to the plunger subassembly. First, install a 1/4" nut onto a 1/4" by 2½ eye bolt and tighten it to the end of the threads. Insert the square tube end of the brake plunger assembly through the bottom of the floorboard at the large round hole of the brake steering mount and push it through the top of the brake steering mount. All right, hold that there for a second. Now, place the brake spring on the brake plunger. Compress the spring coil and insert the eye bolt assembly through the hole of the plunger. The eye bolt faces the rear of the car. Next, place a lock washer on the eye bolt assembly and a nut on the eye bolt and tighten that assembly. Yeah, you're right. Oh, look at me. Okay, now we need to make sure that it operates smoothly. You want to do the honors?
Yeah.
All right, push it down. Looking good. Would you trust that?
Yeah.
All right, so now it's on to the awning pulley sub-assembly. Okay, let's do it. Insert a 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch elevator bolt through the floorboard bottom at the awning pulley hole location and place a fender washer on the bolt on top of the floorboard. You ready with the wrench? Install a 1/4 inch nut. Tighten it to draw the elevator bolt flush with the bottom of the floorboard. Then remove the nut. Add a spacer. Put the awning pulley on the spacer. Do you know that was called an awning pulley?
No.
I did not either. And a 1/4 inch flat washer on the pulley. Add a lock washer and a nut. Okay, once the awning pulley is on, it should move freely and be pointed towards the front of the car. Now we're ready to tighten that nut. We're just making sure it's not bound up in the assembly. The final brake sub-assembly is the cable. Start by sliding 2 cable clamps on one end of the brake cable. Then thread the end of the brake cable about 6 inches through the pedal eye bolt to create a loop around the eye bolt. Now thread the cable back through the 2 cable clamps and tighten them with a 5/64 Allen wrench. Next, thread the other end of the brake cable through the awning pulley, then through the cable pulley at the brake steering mount. Slide 2 cable clamps on the cable and continue the cable up through the brake plunger eye bolt. Now insert the loose end of the cable back through the cable clamps to create a loop around the eye bolt. Pull the loose end of the cable tight and tighten the cable clamps with your Allen wrench. All right, we've got our brake mechanism all hooked up. Now it's time for the fun part, testing it. You want to do it?
Sure.
All right, let's make sure it's got a smooth operation. Looking good. What do you think? Finalize it?
Yeah.
Okay, for that we're just going to put the final tighten on our clamps on both ends. That feels good. All right, then we're going to trim off some of that excess cable and then go back with our black electrical tape once again to keep there from being any frayed ends. You want to get the wire cutters for me?
Sure.
Thank you, nurse. Tee-hee. All right, Gav, this next part, installing the weight bolts, it's pretty easy, actually. You ready to do it?
Yep.
All right. And there are only a few parts to deal with. A 6-inch long carriage bolt, fender washers, flat washers, nuts, and wing nuts. To install the weight bolts, insert the threaded end of one of your 6-inch carriage bolts through the floorboard bottom at the weight hole and press it through the floorboard. Place a flat washer onto the carriage bolt, followed by a nut, then tighten the bolt assembly. Now just repeat those steps for the second weight bolt location. All right, now to reach your optimal weight, you may need to add weight to your car. Now you're going to do that at either the front or rear of those 6-inch bolts. The other thing you need to know is that you have to add the washer and then the wing nut on top of the weight. And even if you don't run weight, you still need to add the washer and the wing nut, right guys? Mm-hmm. Okay, now that's the rules. So the other thing to remember is that you may or may not even need to add weight to get to your target weight. Now your car kit comes with airfoils. That's pretty high tech, pretty cool, huh? All right, and all you need to install those is just some drywall screws and finish washers. So let's get started. For the front axle, slide the airfoil over the front axle square stock. The airfoil must not extend into the spindle portion of the axle. Place a drywall screw through the finish washer and insert the screw with the washer through the rear surface of the axle square stock and then tighten the assembly with a hand screwdriver. Repeat those steps for the second airfoil hole attachment and the second front axle airfoil. By the way, you are not allowed to paint or cover the airfoils in any way, shape, or form. So let's move to the rear axle. And it's a lot like the front axle. You're just going to slip the airfoil over the rear axle square stock without the airfoil extending into the spindle area. You want to keep that flush. Clamps on real nice. It's a great fit. You press it on and just hold itself. Start putting your screws in. Place a drywall screw through a finish washer and insert them through the rear surface of the axle square stock and tighten the assembly with a hand screwdriver. Repeat those steps for the second airfoil hole attachment and the second rear axle airfoil. All right, guys, our car is built, but not quite ready for the track, okay? We want to do the right thing to keep you heading straight down your groove, right in the center line, keep the car tracking straight, and that's going to be where we do our axle alignment and triangulation. Now for that, I'm going to show you how to do it with a tape measure, so it's nice and simple. The great thing is, either car you build, you're going to be able to use these same steps, okay? So the goal here is to get our rear axle at a right angle relative to the body and the floorboard, okay? And that's what's going to keep us going straight down the track, all right? Then once we have that achieved, we'll be able to just tighten everything down and we'll be good to go. Grab me a tape measure. Let's do this. Oh, I got it. When this happens, it makes your car appear as narrow as possible when it goes down the hill and reduces drag from air resistance. If the axle isn't at the right angle, the body of the car isn't pointed straight down the hill. You'll think your car isn't going straight and you'll turn too frequently to correct this, and this is just going to slow your car down. Triangulation uses the front kingpin and two outer points of the axle. Both the front and rear kingpin are drilled so that they are on a center line of the floorboard, so they're in a straight line to each other. The rear axle spindles are equal distances from the axle center kingpin. Here's how you use a tape measure to do your triangulation. You'll have to remove the brake pedal cable since it'll be in the way of the tape measure. Drill a 1/4 inch hole near the end of the tape measure. Take off the first nut only of the front axle kingpin. Slide the 1/4 inch hole end of the tape measure over the front axle kingpin. Slide out the tape measure to compare the measurements of the right and left sides of the rear axle. When both sides are equal distances, the axle is aligned. Help me over the steering wheel, Brittany. Thank you. Oh yeah, we're dead on. All right, now it's time to move on to the front axle alignment. You're going to want to make sure that the front axle is aligned so that the steering wheel is properly centered so the car goes down the track in a straight line. Alrighty, time for the front axle alignment. So I'll hand you that and hook it over the back axle. I'm going to check that. Okay, that's at 63.5. I like having you up front. That way you can look right down on the tape measure and make sure that we're being precise. Okay, now let's go to the other side here. Make sure that our steering wheel stayed centered. It sure has. And we are off. So now we're only at a 63.25 here. We got 63.5 over there. That means we need to increase the tension on the left side of the axle, which is going to pull the axle back a little bit. That 1/8 inch and get us into alignment. So we're going to do that right here. Tighten or loosen the steering cables at the cable adjuster eye bolt until the length is exactly the same on both sides. Tighten the nuts on both sides of the cable adjuster. Check the measurement to ensure that it is equal. Now the steering cable should be tight, but not so tight that it bows the front axle. Make sure that the axle turns the same direction as the steering wheel. Tighten all parts of the steering assembly as shown in step 5. Okay, now that our triangulation is complete, you sure don't want to forget to hook up your brake pedal or put that top kingpin nut on your front axle. Safety first. All right, it is time to get your shell ready and install it on the floorboard. You will need drywall screws, finish washers, foam, your shell, your floorboard assembly, adhesive, and tape. Okay, to get started on the shell, we're going to want to mark the center point of the front edge of the cockpit, and that's going to determine where to put our foam. Alrighty, you ready? Nice, I like that you already had it going for me. Okay, cool. Now apply some adhesive to the surfaces and install the foam. Okay, now the secret trick here is to place the foam right in the center, and then if you would, Brittany, hold this piece. Yeah, that way I don't have to worry about it trying to glue itself on there while I work the other piece around. Be sure to keep the top of your foam flush with the top of the shell. You need to use the entire foam piece without cutting or changing it. Use some tape to hold the foam in place while the adhesive sets. Now we're ready for a very cool part. We're going to put the body shell onto the floorboard. But to do that, we're going to need to raise the floorboard up off the ground. You could just use 2 2x4s, for example, like the ones we showed you earlier, but we're using sawhorses. And the goal here is to set the body on without binding the axle or any of the cables or anything, and you want to make sure that the body doesn't set below the floorboard when you go to attach it. You guys ready? All right, let's do this. I'm going to make you put it up over me. Yeah, use those muscles. All right, there we go. How's it going back there? Looking good. Ow! Now you're going to adjust the shell alignment with the floorboard to make sure that the shell remains flush with the bottom of the floorboard. I've already got this one in place, so now it's time to screw it. Insert a drywall screw through a finish washer, then through the pre-drilled hole at location A at the front center of the car. The shell can be raised up to a 1/2 inch in the rear only. That looks about right. Working front to back, insert another drywall screw with a finish washer through other shell holes of the car and tighten the assembly until the shell is tight to the floorboard. Repeat this process until all of the shell holes are filled with the screw and washer assemblies. All right, now it's time to check for clearances in the body. You want to take a look at your steering cables and axles and make sure there's adequate clearance for proper operation, and if you need to, you can trim the body shell a little bit. Oh yeah, you are headed for the finish line now. Your steering's working, your brakes are working, you got your body shell attached to the floorboard. I think it's time to make this car your own. Now just refer to your plans for proper decal placement, and remember, with Super Stock, you can paint the car, and with stock, you cannot. Now your car is ready for the wheels. It is so exciting. All right, now your wheel kit is going to include wheel washers, wheel pins, and Z-glass wheels. What are you waiting for? Let's get them on. This step is quick and easy. Simply place a Z-glass wheel on an axle spindle, followed by the wheel washer. Next, install a wheel pin from the front of the axle through the horizontal hole in the axle spindle. The round part of the wheel pin faces the front of the car. You don't have to use washers, but if you want to, you can use up to 2 washers per spindle. Repeat this step for the other 3 wheels. Now that the wheels are on your car, you are done. All right, guys, you made a good team. There's only one thing left to do the way I see it. Let's go race.
Yeah!
All right.